The Women's Leadership Institute in the Auburn University College of Liberal Arts is pleased to present Leaders Educating Through Discussion. We hope you will take a moment after you watch our presentation to add your own voice to the dialogue on our website, auburn.edu/women's leadership.
Well, is this a room full of energy and outrageousness and activism or what? I've never been preceded by my own words before. I'm not sure I can live up to my own words and live up to Elizabeth and to Oprah. But here's my hope, my deep, deep hope for today, that each of us might leave here with some new feeling of support, some new aha, some new piece of information, some new revolutionary colleague, friend, co-conspirator that will make our lives more just and more fair the next day and the next. So in order to make that happen, we have to do this together, right? So you have to forget about the fact that you are organized in this way, each looking at each other's backs. We have to be like this because of our numbers, but this is a hierarchical structure. Hierarchy is based on patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore. So I hope that during what is called the question and answer period, you won't just ask questions, but you will give us answers. You will make announcements of any upcoming troublemaking meetings you think this group should know about. You will say what's in your hearts and minds, and we can pretend we're sitting in a circle so we can learn from each other and truly see each other. This event has a special meaning for me too, because I was here in what we think is 1970. It was either 1970 or 71, when the big issues were parietal rules, for young women having to be back in their dorms, and also the regulation of dress. Was anybody here then? Look at that, that's fantastic. Okay, so it's good, because I need a memory aid so you can. But I'm pretty sure, I know that for that first 15 years of my speaking life, I was afraid to speak by myself. So I bet I was here with Florence Kennedy, remember Florence Kennedy, or Dorothy Pittman Hughes. One of my two was Dorothy, okay. Because, and it shows you, I think, how if you're just honest about your fears, it sort of works out, because I had chosen in my life to be a writer and a dancer, and neither one wants to talk, so I really only started to speak in public when I was in my middle 30s, because I was desperate, because the magazines and newspapers I'd been working for wouldn't publish any feminist articles, or if they published an article saying women were equal, then they had to publish one saying they weren't in order to be objective. Right. So the only way to talk about this huge explosion of, the big aha of we're not crazy, the system is crazy, that, that the social justice movements are, was to come out and speak, and I couldn't do this by myself. So Dorothy Pittman Hughes, a child care expert who was running a child care center, a early non-sexist, multiracial, revolutionary child care center in New York City, was fearless. So she became my speaking partner, and I came here with her. And because we were both honest about our need to speak together, we accidentally discovered that as a white woman and a black woman together, we of course got audiences that we never ever would have got by ourselves. We were shocking in a very satisfying way. Every once in a while, some audience, a guy would stand up in the back and say, "Are you lesbians?" Because why else would we be together? And Dorothy and Flo would say, "Are you my alternative?" And he would. The perfect answer, right? Right. So, you know, it really has special meaning for me to come back here after all these years and discover how profound the progress is that we've made. Because every single issue that we care about now has majority support in all the public opinion polls. And many of these issues didn't even have names before. I mean, domestic violence was just called life. I mean, it didn't have a name. And we had not yet figured out how to say that rape was violence, not sex, and, you know, so many things. That is a huge, huge difference. But it also means that we have a big, profound backlash. Huge. It has been going on for a very long time. It's a minority in terms of public opinion polls, but it's in control of lots and lots of the centers of power. And actually now, when I think about domestic violence, and now that we have come to understand that violence in the home is pretty much the paradigm for all other violence, I realize that the country is in something of the same state as a woman undergoing domestic violence. Because she, as we know now, the most dangerous time for a woman or a man, but it's mostly women undergoing domestic violence, is at the moment before or after she escapes. It's all about control. Right, and at the moment before or after she escapes control is the most likely time she will be beaten or even murdered. And I think that in a way, the country is there now. If you think about it, we are turning against, we have turned against 2 wars in much less time than it took us to turn against Vietnam. We do have majority support for all the issues of individual rights and human rights that we didn't have before. In about 20 minutes, we're no longer going to be a majority European American or white country, which strikes me as kind of terrific. Maybe we'll understand the world better, you know? But it's a big crisis in confidence for a whole bunch of people who think this has to be a majority white, Christian, you know, certain kind of country. They are in a panic, total panic. We have discovered the reality, which has always been true, that sexuality is a form of communication, not just reproduction, and therefore, you know, takes many, many diverse forms. And these folks are still believing that sexuality is only okay when it is directed toward reproduction and takes place inside patriarchal marriage so that children are properly owned. It's a huge, huge kind of change. Actually, it explains a lot, though. Sometimes on campuses, young people will say to me, why is it that the same groups are against both lesbians and birth control? I mean, it makes sense when you understand that they're against any sexual expression, you know, that can't end in conception, which, of course, sexuality has always been for human beings. I mean, there's just all of these things are now huge majority changes, and you can see it in their other coalitions. For instance, the same groups are against immigration at all, and certainly undocumented immigration, which incidentally is a woman's issue. I mean, I know that we are made to think that all immigrants are drug-dealing men or something, but actually 65% of immigrants are women and their children. You know, it is a woman's issue. But they are both against immigration in general, and also safe and legal abortion, because white women are having fewer children, and so they think the white race is committing suicide. I mean, you know, all of these things are coming together in a way that tells me that this country is out of their control. It is out of their control, and that means two things. One, it's a time of maximum danger, and we have to look after each other. And the other is we're about to be free. And we are not going to stop, just as we would not tell a woman to stay in a violent household. We will not tell ourselves to stop. But we are at a time in which our future is uncertain, you know, which way will it go? And it depends on what you and I do every day. I think the biggest problem with our activism is that we have been deeply convinced that the top is what makes the difference. You know, we elect a president and then we sit back and say, well, now we've done our job. No, excuse me. I mean, we have a lot more to do than that. And we feel disempowered because we think the change comes from the top and not the bottom. In fact, change is like a tree. You know, it does come from the bottom. So the art of behaving effectively and ethically is behaving as if everything we do matters. Because we have no idea which thing is going to matter anyway. And besides that, it isn't, the art of making change is not saying, what should I do? What's most important? Forget about that. It's saying, what can I do? Anything. The way we treat each other, the words we use. Whether or not we object to unfairness that we see around us and how people are paid or who's called on in class or, you know, whatever it is what you and I do every day. So I hope that we might leave here feeling empowered and also leave here understanding that the idea that the movements are over or that we're in a post-racist, post-feminist age is just bullshit. I mean, it's just pure bullshit. And the same people, I can testify that the same people who used to say to me, you can't do that. It's against nature, it's against God, it's against Freud, somebody, you know. The same people are now saying, well, it used to be necessary, but it's not anymore. The movement is over. That is just the current opposition that the movement is experiencing. It's absolutely untrue. Even by any historical precedent, if you think that it took more than 100 years to gain a legal identity as human beings as opposed to chattel for women of all races and men of color, more than 100 years just to become humans and not possessions, it's going to take more than 100 years for us to get legal and social equality. And I don't know how to break this to you, but I figure we're only about 40 years into it, so we have like 60 years to go. So it is very, very new. And also, you know, the interesting thing for me is that the reason people know me or Bella Abzug or Shirley Chisholm or Patsy Mink or, you know, all kinds of folks is because there were so few of us. We were like 12 crazy people, you know? So now there's this kind of question of, you know, well, where is the next whoever? The point is there are too many of us for that to ever be the question again. And now we have great, great young leaders like Ai-jen Poo. Do you know who that is? She is such a gifted organizer, and she is the leader of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which has been working for minimum wage for domestic workers, including domestic work and all other human endeavor around the country, and winning victories state by state. I actually think there might be a new union movement because we're working on family leave. There's so many, and increasing the minimum wage, which is now the big issue in the country. There's so many rock bottom issues that I think we could have a union movement like the 1930s again. And it's interesting to see the women like iGen leading it, because I think partly what happened to the union movement and made it unpopular was its tactics. I mean, it was within itself sometimes also sexist and racist, as we know, and also it was quite negative in the way that it was led in a kind of masculine way. I mean, you need to be negative sometimes, but not all the time. So I think that this new movement that is coming up with young leaders is restoring the roses to the bread. And we will have bread and roses once again, because they are speaking in a positive way of our relationships to each other, and especially with household workers, of course, as we are all together. And that has so many people, and a new movement. There are women, young women like Salamisha Tillett, who is a professor of Africana Studies at the University of Pennsylvania, and who, as a survivor of sexual assault herself, has started with her sister an organization called A Long Walk Home, which is helping young women in many American cities to organize against the sexual violence that so many women, and some men too, have experienced in the military, on campuses. It's 1 in 5 women on campuses who've experienced some form of sexual assault. There's Amy Richards, who I work with, and who started a lecture agency for revolutionary speakers called Soapbox, and who runs a course that is brings students and professors for a kind of feminist 2 or 3 weeks in big cities that transforms their lives. There's a huge men's movement, which hasn't quite come to the surface yet in the national consciousness, but it's been there for a very long time. And men like Michael Kimmel, whose work you might know as an author and an activist, are bringing together these men's groups that are rebelling against the masculine role, which incidentally is shortening guys' lives. Once in Ms. Magazine, in an editorial meeting, we took out of the statistics all the reasons why men died that could be attributed to the masculine role: tension-related diseases, guns, violence, so on. And it turned out that men lived about 8 years longer. I mean, this movement has 8 years of extra life for you to live. This is not a bad offer, right? And there are so many men who want to see their kids, and have a relationship with their kids. And I think men raising children is the answer, because it allows men to realize their full humanity. All those things that are wrongly called feminine are just the qualities you need to raise kids. Patience, nurturing, attention to detail, all those things. And men who either raise children as much as women do, or are raised to raise children, as I was, and I don't have children, you develop those qualities. And so men develop the full circle of qualities and are much, much, much less likely to feel they have to be violent or controlling in order to be masculine, are much more likely to be human rather than masculine, are much more likely to be immune from the idea that you have to go to war and get killed in order to be masculine. It's interesting that the whole idea of masculinity came up in order to control reproduction, which is women's bodies, and also in order to go to war against your own interest, in order to prove that you're masculine. Self-defense, yes, we're all into self-defense. But to go to war for someone else's, for a king or some other class interest, required the teaching of men that they had to prove their masculinity. So I think that, like Michael and many, many men all over the country, we are seeing male leaders in the feminist movement and with an understanding that that means being against race, being supportive of all forms of sexual expression, being immune, you might say, from the idea that we have to prove ourselves. We just are. Everyone here is a unique individual, the product of generations upon generations of heredity and environment combined in a unique way that could never have happened before and could never happen again. And here we are in a combination of people that could never, has never happened before, and probably will never happen again. And that's what's magic about this. That's why I hope we might each leave here with something unique. I know that we grow up in a technological age, and technology is the medium but not the message. It's very, very important. Media give us an idea of what's normal, but media are not reality. Reality is reality. There's a revolutionary notion. So I think that we are beginning at least to understand that we need, yes, we need technology and we need media, and media is like the current campfire. You know, we've been sitting for 100,000 years around around campfires telling our stories. Okay, so media is the current campfire. And we need to get everybody into it, because otherwise the people out of it think they're abnormal somehow or invisible. But the truth is that the, what is it, oxytocin, I think, that allows us to empathize with each other requires all 5 senses. It only happens in rooms like this one. It doesn't happen from a piece of paper. It doesn't happen from a computer screen. Revolutions are not accomplished by pressing send. And this is what we are doing here today, is an absolutely crucial part of our understanding, our empathy for each other, and our ability to act. Sometimes reporters will ask me, what one thing would you do for the women's movement worldwide? This is like saying, describe the universe and give 2 examples. It's an impossible question. However, I have evolved an answer. And the answer is that the one thing I would ask for the women's movement, or any social justice movement worldwide, is a kind of global AA. You know, imagine a global feminist AA, you know, so you could, by the banks of the Zambezi River, in the basement of the YWCA, and you know, wherever you are, wherever you move, you could find a small group of people with shared values, however diverse they may be, and you could find support for this worldview. You could find a kind of psychic family, a chosen family. And that's what we need, because we are communal creatures. If we're by ourselves, we come to feel crazy, alone, wrong. So we need at least once a month and hopefully once a week to sit with each other and say what's happening to us and get advice and share this worldview, which is that we are linked, we are not ranked. That human beings have always been naturally empathetic with each other. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't have survived as a species. If we didn't naturally feel a leap of empathy to another human being who's in trouble, we never, ever would have survived. But so many of our systems in the last few hundred years have been about breaking that empathy. It's broken by child abuse, which makes you feel that there's only two choices, to be the victim or the victimizer, right? It's broken by all ideas of hierarchy, of gender, which doesn't exist, we invented it, of race, which doesn't exist, we invented it. We all came from Africa, every single one of us. We just got more or less melanin depending on where we went, you know. Those ideas of hierarchy break the empathy. There was a study, and probably many studies, of Good Samaritans, the people who helped Jews during World War II, even though they themselves were not Jewish, and risked their lives. And so after the war, everybody wanted to replicate them. So the question was, what did they share? Was it education? Was it religion? Family form? What was it? And the conclusion was that the thing they were most likely to share was they hadn't been abused as children. So that natural leap of empathy to another human being wasn't interrupted. And they all kind of said the same thing, you know, as to why they had acted, which was, I don't know why I did it, I just did it. You know, it just didn't occur to me not to do it. I just saw somebody who needed help and I helped them. And I think, you know, that is in us. And that's, so it's not so much getting a new system in some ways as it is getting rid of systems. So we free that natural leap of empathy that's probably in us from the beginning. All over the world, for instance, I just came from a month in India. All over the world, kids say similar things that go like this. It's not fair. You are not the boss of me. And you know, that if we can just preserve that, that's the whole ballgame right there. It's not that we're more important than someone else, but we are not less important either. And it's in us if we remove these ideas of gender, of race, of caste, of class, of all the ways that we have been organized into hierarchies for the benefit of somebody that is usually not us, and made to feel inadequate and as if we have to earn our status as opposed to be ourselves and find what we love to do, what we forget what time it is we love so much. And forget that we need each other and we need each other's support. So, you know, I don't think there's any grounds to be discouraged, even though we are facing huge backlash and huge danger, as I said. And even though we are facing a global danger that's big. I mean, religions that tell us that doomsday is a good thing and that heaven is better, you know, that death is better than life, very dangerous, have coincided with doomsday weapons. And that is very, very dangerous. But at the same time, we know that we're on to the to what to do about it. For instance, there is a book now I really recommend to you called Sex and World Peace, published 2 years ago, Sex and World Peace, by Valerie Hudson and other scholars. But don't be scared by scholars, it's a very readable book. And it proves with 100 modern countries that the biggest determinant of whether a country is violent inside itself, in its streets and so on, or whether that country will be willing to use military violence against another country, is not poverty or need for natural resources or religion or even degree of democracy. It's violence against females. That is not because females are more important than males, no, but because that's the system we have in families, and it makes kids feel that people are born into roles that are inferior and superior, and it makes kids feel that violence is inevitable. And it makes some male kids feel that they have to be violent in order to be masculine. And some women feel that they have to accept violence in order to be feminine. So, you know, it is fundamental. And now I think we understand that. We're beginning to understand that, you know, eliminating violence against females is nothing less than the key to world peace. But it is also at a peak now because of son preference, son surplus and daughter deficit in huge parts of the world, because of domestic violence here, which is huge. I mean, if you add up all the people, Americans killed in 9/11, killed in Afghanistan, killed in Iraq, more women have been murdered by their husbands and boyfriends in the same period of time in this country. Yet we don't talk about domestic terrorism, we talk about foreign terrorism much more. There's female genital cutting, there's female infanticide, you know, there's sexual violence in war zones. I mean, there's everything you already know. And as a result of this now, for the first time that I have read about in human history, there are fewer females on the planet than males. We are no longer half the human race. So the question is really, what will happen? I mean, we have the consciousness of what's wrong, but what's wrong is huge. What will we do every day? And will we have faith enough? You know, hope is a form of planning. That's what hope is. So to allow ourselves to be hopeless means that we are defeated before we even begin. So I hope that we kind of understand that all of our movements are connected. You know, I mean, you have to control reproduction to keep sex, to keep race, caste, class going. You have to say that sex can only be directed towards reproduction. I mean, you know, the same impulse to control and conquer women is the masculine notion of conquering nature. Excuse me, we're part of nature. What do you mean conquering nature? But we do, I hope, understand that our movements are connected. And I think, for me, this may be too removed, I don't know, but for me there's one final source of hope, and that is that for 95% of human history, systems were different. On this continent, especially, we should know that. On this land where we now sit, who were here? The Cherokee, I think. No? The Cree. All right, so as far as we can tell, the 500 or 600 nations on this continent before Europeans showed up with patriarchy, importing patriarchy and racism and so on, were matrilineal. And you know, the idea of gender was fluid. I mean, yes, most women did agriculture and men hunted and so on, but both did both. And it was okay if a male human being wanted to play a female role in ritual. In fact, there was a special idea that twin-spirited people were valuable and had special skills that were used and that were honored in society. I don't know about Cree, but I know in Cherokee and a lot of the other languages there was no gender. There was no he and she. Imagine that. And then, but the Europeans got so crazy for reasons I think I understand. I mean, I think what happened there, but it's another story. That they gave gender, they invented gender in order to control reproduction. So the masculine thing controlled the feminine. They invented gender to such a degree that they gave gender to tables and chairs and spoons and knives. Hello, you know? Is this crazy, right? The Europeans who came here were aghast at the role of women. I mean, in fact, my native women friends now say they make jokes because otherwise you don't survive. You don't make jokes. What did Columbus think was primitive? Equal women. Women understood how to control their own fertility and decide when and whether to have children because they had lots of herbs and abortifacients and they understood timing and so on. I mean, God was in everything. God was not a white guy. Didn't you always wonder when you were little why Jesus was blonde and blue-eyed in the middle of the Middle East? I mean, so... You know, if God is man, man is God, excuse me. The politics of religion is something we really have to admit. Religion is just politics you can't talk about. Spirituality is quite different. You know, it says God is in all living things, but religion is mostly about hierarchy and imposing an idea of reality. So, you know, I think if we look at 95% of human history and understand that the last 5% of 5,000 years, only about 500 years on this continent, 5,000 maybe in other parts of the world, that we understand it's not human nature that we are born into these ridiculous hierarchies. It's the contrary of human nature. So, I feel hopeful and encouraged and full of ahas, you know, as to what might happen. And I also am inspired by an image at the end of Sex and World Peace where the authors explain, I mean, depict the human race as a bird with two wings. As long as one wing is crippled, the female half of the human race, human beings can't soar. But when both are strong, then both soar. Thank you.